There is a moment in every culture across every continent that is celebrated as the pinnacle of human existence. A photograph is taken, a name is chosen, and a new life begins. Society applauds this act as the highest form of love, selflessness, and fulfillment. The mother beams, the father swells with pride, and everyone agrees. This is the essence of meaning. This moment, which the world proclaims as creation, Arthur Schopenhauer declares to be annihilation. He sees not a beginning, but a repetition, a cosmic debt being passed on, and the final catastrophic destruction of the parent's potential for freedom. The question we must ask, the brutal and unforgiving question that cuts through centuries of romantic delusion, is why having children guarantees the perpetual destruction of your soul, condemning both you and your progeny to the relentless torment of existence. This is not mere cynicism. This is the merciless honesty of a philosopher who looked directly into the face of reality and refused to blink. Before we delve into the darkness of this affirmation, tell me which city you are currently watching from, because this philosophy transcends borders and time zones. The truth we are about to confront is universal, reaching every corner of the globe where the blind, relentless engine of life continues to turn. Schopenhauer establishes his argument not with sociology or morality, but with metaphysics. He introduces the concept of the will, the Wille zum Leben. This will is the ultimate reality, a blind, irrational, aimless, ceaseless striving that forms the substratum of all existence. It is not intelligent, it is merely force. It is the cosmic urge to be, to persist, and to reproduce. The will, in Schopenhauer's framework, is the source of all suffering, because suffering is inherent to striving. We are never satisfied. We are always wanting. We chase desire, and when we momentarily catch it, the relief is brief, immediately replaced by either the gnawing ache of the next desire or the crushing weight of boredom. Our lives are a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom, and the engine powering that swing is the will. This understanding changes everything about the perception of parenthood. The act of procreation, which is lauded as a conscious choice of love, is revealed to be nothing more than the most potent deception orchestrated by the will. The individual human being, with their ephemeral consciousness and fleeting intellect, believes they are acting out of personal desire or affection. They believe they are seeking fulfillment, connection, or a legacy. But the reality, according to Schopenhauer, is that they are merely the current, disposable vehicle the will is using to ensure its survival into the next generation. The will does not care about your happiness, your career, your personal development, or your eventual peace. It only cares about the physical continuation of itself. Consider the overwhelming force of sexual desire and the romantic idealization that precedes procreation. Schopenhauer views romantic love not as a sublime connection between two individuals, but as a clever trick, a lure. The specific intensity of attraction one feels for another person is entirely directed by the biological imperative to create the most robust and genetically optimal next vessel for the will. The features, the personality, the timing, all of it is calculated by the species' interest, not the individual's interest. Once the mission is accomplished, once the new vessel is conceived, the intensity of the romantic illusion often fades, leaving the individual stranded in the practical realities of their servitude. This is the moment the soul begins its destruction, when the blinding light of the will's illusion subsides, and the stark, painful reality of the committed service remains. When an individual chooses to have children, they are performing the ultimate act of metaphysical affirmation. They are endorsing the terrible cycle of the will. They are shouting into the void, "Yes, this suffering is worthwhile. Let us duplicate it." Schopenhauer argues that if life were truly a gift, if happiness were the default state, humans would not require such elaborate deceptions. The ecstasy of falling in love, the cultural pressure, the biological urgency to ensure procreation. The fact that the process requires such profound masking and coercion proves that existence is fundamentally undesirable. A genuinely desirable commodity does not need to be so aggressively marketed. The first casualty in the destruction of the soul is the individual's potential for freedom. For Schopenhauer, the highest moral and intellectual achievement a human can attain is the denial of the will, to recognize the suffering inherent in striving, and to seek respite through aesthetic contemplation, asceticism, or deep philosophical insight. This path requires a profound withdrawal from the mundane demands of the will. It demands time, solitude, intellectual space, and freedom from physical servitude. Parenthood eradicates this possibility. The moment a child is introduced, the striving is multiplied and intensified. The parent ceases to live for self-knowledge or transcendence and begins to live entirely for the new vessel. Their time, their finances, their energy, and their focus are perpetually tethered to the physical and emotional maintenance of the child. The parent, who might otherwise have dedicated their life to art, science, or metaphysical inquiry, is now consumed by diapers, school fees, and emotional crises. Their life becomes a relentless series of pragmatic tasks, driven entirely by biological necessity. They are transformed from potential philosopher into functional slave. This slavery is particularly painful because it forces the parent to double down on the very suffering they are trying to escape. They must now strive for two. They must endure the endless competition of the marketplace, not for their own fleeting desires, but for the sake of the next generation's survival. They must re-enter the terrible game of life with renewed vigor, affirming the very system that causes them pain. The soul, which had perhaps begun to glimpse the possibility of detachment, the resignation that comes from understanding the world's true nature, is violently dragged back into the fray, bound by the chains of responsibility. Furthermore, the parent destroys their soul by committing the greatest moral transgression in Schopenhauer's view, the conscious imposition of suffering upon an innocent being. The child is born into a debt that can never be paid. They will inevitably experience want, illness, betrayal, decay, and ultimately death. This is not a risk. It is a guarantee built into the structure of existence. Schopenhauer sees the parent not as a benefactor, but as a cosmic creditor, forcing a new soul to take up the terrible burden of living. The love and protection the parent offers are merely temporary mitigations of the suffering they themselves are fundamentally responsible for creating. It is a profound betrayal. The parent knows, consciously or subconsciously, the misery and disappointment life holds. They have experienced the cruelty of time, the fragility of the body, and the existential anxiety of consciousness. Yet, driven by the blind impulse of the will, misinterpreted as love or instinct, they choose to inflict this knowledge, this pain, upon a new being. This is the definition of existential irresponsibility. The parent's soul is corrupted because they choose biological necessity over rational compassion, sentencing another to the Schopenhauerian prison of pain and boredom. The destruction accelerates as the parent begins to view their own life solely through the lens of the child's survival. Their identity, once rooted in personal experience or achievement, dissolves into the role of provider and protector. Schopenhauer notes that the world is inherently hostile to the individual, but it favors the species. By entering into parenthood, the individual surrenders their unique subjectivity to the objective purpose of the species. They become generic, losing the sharp edges of their own existence to the smooth, repetitive requirements of biological succession. The parent gives up the possibility of genuine detachment. Detachment, for Schopenhauer, is the closest thing to salvation, the ability to view the world as idea, rather than being trapped in the struggle of the will. But the parent cannot detach. They are perpetually attached by the most fundamental emotional bond to the fate of their offspring. Their suffering is magnified exponentially, as they must not only endure their own inevitable disappointments, but also the disappointments, failures, and agonies of their child. Every fever, every heartbreak, every professional setback suffered by the offspring is an immediate pain inflicted upon the parent's soul, confirming the initial, tragic affirmation of the will. We see this played out in the world continually. Men and women who once held intellectual curiosity, who valued independent thought, who cultivated rich inner lives, become hollowed-out husks, defined only by the logistical demands of raising another human being. They exchange philosophy for childcare, poetry for PTA meetings, and the pursuit of profound truth for the relentless pursuit of financial stability. The world rewards this sacrifice with cultural praise, but metaphysically, it is a catastrophic loss. They have exchanged the chance for eternal insight for the certainty of temporary physical servitude. They have chosen life's greatest illusion, that happiness is achievable through reproduction, over the difficult solitary truth that the only reprieve from suffering is the conscious denial of the urge to perpetuate it. This surrender is what Schopenhauer calls the ultimate tragedy. It is the victory of the mindless, subterranean will over the fragile, aspiring intellect. And what is left of the soul after this victory? Only the functional parts, the capacity for worry, the mechanism for defense, the engine for provision, the capacity for transcendent joy, for intellectual peace, for the glorious resignation of the ascetic. These capacities are destroyed, overwhelmed by the fierce primal necessity of maintaining the next generation. The individual is extinguished. Only the biological function remains. We must internalize this first foundation, that the apparent joy of creation is, under the lens of brutal honesty, the conscious affirmation of universal suffering and the ultimate sacrifice of personal, spiritual liberation to the blind mechanism of biology. We have established how the will tricks the individual, and how the subsequent commitment fundamentally destroys the parent's potential for intellectual freedom, binding them instead to a life of compounded striving. The philosophical implications of this realization are profound, demanding an immediate response, a decision on how one should proceed once this foundational lie is exposed. This truth cuts deeply, but the next step is even more critical. Now, let this thought sink in. The greatest trap is the one wrapped in the sweetest illusion. Share your thoughts on this idea by commenting below using the phrase, "the sweetest lie." Recognize the profound strength it takes to face a truth this devastating. If you believe in the pursuit of genuine, unmasked understanding, and if you want to join a community dedicated to exploring these brutal realities, affirm your commitment to this deeper perspective by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Next time, we will confront the terrible consequence of this realization. We will move beyond the destruction of the parent's soul and examine the few agonizing choices that Schopenhauer leaves available to the rational man who truly understands the nature of the will and the true meaning of existence. Prepare yourself for the conclusion of this devastating truth. The most brutal moment of self-betrayal is not when a man chooses a bad path, but when he celebrates the choice that guarantees his imprisonment. A man celebrates the birth of his child, holding the infant to the light, proclaiming love and purpose, believing he has finally found meaning in the chaotic meaninglessness of the world. Schopenhauer watches this scene, not with pity, but with the cold, precise recognition of a philosophical executioner. This man, the parent, is not a hero. He is a sacrificial lamb who has volunteered his soul, not to God, but to the blind, ravenous, and endless will. He thinks he has gained life. In truth, he has signed the final and unforgivable contract of self-destruction. This is the ultimate fraud perpetrated by nature upon the sentient mind, the illusion of purpose delivered by the act of biological replication. Before we dive back into the depths of this self-imposed tragedy, tell me, where is your mind being challenged right now? What city are you watching from? The destruction of the soul begins the moment the individual ceases to be an end in itself and becomes merely a means for the species. The man who once pursued philosophy, who sought the solace of art, who dedicated his quiet hours to the contemplation of truth, that man is dead. He has been replaced by the manager of maintenance, the chief operating officer of survival. His intellect, his greatest shield against the irrationality of the will, is now wholly commandeered for logistics, funding education, ensuring shelter, procuring health. This shift is not merely a change in schedule, it is a metaphysical amputation. Schopenhauer argues that genuine intellectual freedom requires a liberation from the immediate tyranny of the will, a state achieved only through aesthetic contemplation or ascetic denial. But the parent, by definition, has plunged himself deeper into the will's machinery. He can no longer afford the luxury of detachment. His soul, once positioned high above the fray, observing the cosmic tragedy, is now trapped firmly within the gears, mandated to turn them. The soul's previous objectives, the pursuit of wisdom, the desire for spiritual transcendence, are annihilated, replaced by the crushing, mediocre urgency of biological continuity. The quiet strength that once allowed him to face the world's suffering with philosophical resignation is broken, because now his suffering is multiplied by a factor of 1, or 2, or 3. And this is where the true horror manifests. Before having children, the individual suffered his own unique and finite torment. He knew his misery would end with his own death, offering a final, definitive escape. But by procreating, he has irrevocably extended the lease on suffering. He has ensured that the cycle he desperately wished to understand and transcend will continue, forcing him to witness the repetition of the error he calls existence, manifested in the being he calls his child. The parent believes the child offers an escape from the dread of non-being, a kind of biological immortality. This is the second great deception. What he actually achieves is the imposition of a metaphysical debt. Schopenhauer views human existence as fundamentally a mistake, a continuous striving that can never find true satisfaction, like an eternal Sisyphus pushing a rock. To bring a child into this world is not an act of creation. It is the deliberate infliction of this eternal sentence upon an innocent party. The soul of the parent is destroyed not just by the burden of maintenance, but by the guilt, whether acknowledged or subconscious, of having willfully subjected a new consciousness to the world's inevitable cycle of desire, disappointment, pain, and death. Consider the parent watching his child struggle through the predictable stages of human misery, the heartbreak of first love, the anxiety of professional competition, the existential terror of aging, and the final crushing realization that their own efforts, like their parents', are ultimately futile against the backdrop of cosmic indifference. The individual who remains childless, the one who chose the path of denial, can observe this universal suffering with the detachment of a surgeon, painful, perhaps, but separate. The parent, however, watches this cycle not as an observer, but as the primary cause. He is condemned to relive his own pain through the hypersensitized lens of parental empathy. This empathy, which society extols as a virtue, becomes the instrument of his soul's undoing. It ensures that the parent can never fully retreat into the solitude necessary for philosophical peace. His emotional anchor is permanently set in the sea of universal striving, pulled constantly by the current of his child's needs and inevitable sorrows. Schopenhauer's honesty is brutal because he strips away the romantic veneer surrounding the family unit. He sees it as a fortress built on sand, a temporary defense mechanism constructed by the will to perpetuate itself, regardless of the individual cost. The intellectual life, the life of deep reflection and understanding, demands separation from the will. The familial life demands total submersion within it. The parent is now tethered to utility, unable to pursue the intellectual detachment that might have offered a path to ethical or spiritual salvation. Every moment spent comforting a child, every ounce of energy expended on providing sustenance, is energy diverted from the soul's original higher purpose, the cessation of desire, and the realization of the world's true nature as suffering. The tragic irony completes the destruction. The parent, seeking to alleviate the fear of their own eventual annihilation, guarantees their enduring misery while they are still alive. They become vulnerable in ways the childless can never comprehend. They are hostage to fortune. The health, safety, and success of their offspring become points of unbearable anxiety. The world, which was already a theater of pain, transforms into a minefield of potential catastrophe, each potential injury to the child registering as a direct excruciating blow to the parental soul. This state of perpetual dread, the constant low-grade fear that defines parenthood, is the emotional equivalent of being permanently bound and gagged, unable to cry out, yet forced to witness the coming storm. The greatest betrayal, Schopenhauer suggests, is the parent's unwitting collusion with the will. Nature's cunning lies in dressing up the mechanism of species survival, sex and procreation, in the beautiful illusion of love and personal fulfillment. The moment of conception is the apex of the will's power over the intellect. The individual, momentarily tricked by biological compulsion, sacrifices his hard-won understanding of existence. The soul is not merely damaged, it is effectively liquidated, its unique value exchanged for the generic, transient value of being a biological transmission agent. He now belongs to the endless chain. He is no longer defined by his thoughts, his art, or his ethical striving, but by his relationship to the future generation. He is defined by debt, the debt of maintenance, the debt of protection, and the ultimate metaphysical debt of having summoned a new being into a realm of suffering. And because he is responsible for this new existence, he is morally compelled to sustain it, locking himself into a future of unrelenting service, unable to prioritize his own needs, his own intellectual freedom, or his own final quiet liberation from the will. The door to salvation, which Schopenhauer believed lay in the complete denial of the will to life, slams shut and is barred by the very life the parent celebrated creating. The man who once sought to be a philosopher, an ascetic, or simply a free agent has become a functionary in nature's factory. His soul, once striving for rarefied air, now suffocates in the dense utilitarian atmosphere of daily survival and endless responsibility. The brutal honesty of Schopenhauer is that this destruction is irreversible. There is no going back to the solitary, contemplative self. The bonds of parenthood are the strongest chains the will possesses, ensuring that the individual's life force is spent, not on his own spiritual ascent, but on fueling the engine of human misery for one more generation. The parent's life is now a testament to the tragic triumph of biology over awareness, a living embodiment of Schopenhauer's central thesis. Existence is pain, and the ultimate folly is to volunteer others to bear the same burden. The soul, having understood the world's horror, then chooses to multiply it, sealing its own fate in a perpetual cycle of vicarious sorrow and functional slavery. This crushing reality, this relentless mechanism of self-sacrifice and spiritual evaporation, is the definitive conclusion Schopenhauer forces upon us. We see the parent, surrounded by the superficial warmth of family life, yet philosophically colder and lonelier than ever before, trapped in the knowledge that he is the source of his child's inevitable suffering, and the architect of his own eternal functional utility. His soul, once a beacon of awareness, has been fully consumed by the shadows of biological duty. This exploration cuts deep, challenging the most sacred and accepted norms of human existence. We face the brutal truth of the will's victory over the individual soul. The ability to confront such painful insights is what separates the merely living from the truly aware. I want to know which phrase from this analysis resonates most intensely with your current thoughts. Write a single sentence in the comments that summarizes the destruction of the soul by biological mandate, something like, utility replaces spirit, or the will's final trap is called love. Drop that phrase below and join the minds who refuse to look away. We are building a community dedicated to unflinching honesty. Smash that like button right now to affirm your commitment to challenging comfortable lies. And if you are ready to continue this journey of exposing the deep underlying mechanisms of human tragedy and power, hit subscribe. There are depths yet uncovered, strategies yet unmasked, and we are preparing to unveil a truth so fundamental it reorders your understanding of motivation and control. Do not miss the next transmission. It will demonstrate the ultimate power move used by the truly liberated, a move the masses never see coming.